What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? The events of the past few days, hailing from Minneapolis, Minnesota, that we have watched in anger and disgust of a white police officer who took his knee and put it in the neck of a black man by the name of George Floyd, 46 years of age, and held it there until he suffocated him to death. And with such indifference and disdain, knew that he was on camera and could have cared less. It is a picture of man's inhumanity towards man. It is man treating another man like he's not a dog, but less than a dog. How sad it is that in America in 2020, there are still those civil servants who believe that blue is better than black. How awful it is that we are living in a day and age where black men and black women still have to prepare their sons to go out into a world each day that loves and hates them at the same time. How awful it must be for a black mother, a black father, to open the door in the morning and release their children into the hands of a world that has nothing but disdain for them. Because of the color of their skin, because of their speech, because of their aesthetics, for some reason, white America still hates them. The acts of the 4 officers in Minneapolis, Minnesota on the other day, I want to be clear, are nothing short of diabolical. They are demonic at their very core. They stand against everything that America says she stands for. The very idea that those officers are not locked behind iron bars today, and that judgment is not being swiftly executed, is in itself abhorrent. America is supposed to be better than that. It is shameful that while we live in a country that is the richest country in the world, and while we live in a country that touts itself as a place where justice can be found, we still have a justice system that is unjust for many of its citizens. I asked myself in thinking about the events of the past few days, the events of the past few months, and the events of the past few years, because we cannot talk about George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, without talking about Trayvon Martin from Florida, without talking about Alton Sterling, without talking about so many others, not only young black brothers, but sisters. Sandra Bland. We have to talk about what is going on in our country in this day and time, and especially now where the climate is so sinister. We are making a big to-do about 100,000 plus lives that have been lost by coronavirus, in these past 3 to 4 months. But I want to tell you there is a virus running rampant in the streets of the cities of America that far precede that of coronavirus. It is the virus of prejudice, hatred, racism is running rampant through the streets of our cities. What shall we then say to these things? It shakes me at my very core that so many of us who are African American leaders, and yes, let's talk about this, those of us too who are Caucasian leaders, leaders from every walk of life, whether you are a Christian leader, you are leading in the broader world, wherever your leadership takes you, I submit to you that our voices during these times must be heard, or else we have no voice at all. It is deplorable that a man or a woman who puts a badge on his or her chest on a daily basis and straps a gun to their waist is walking around and walking through the streets of our cities with obvious and evident hate for those they are supposed to be serving. How can you serve a people you have absolutely no respect for? It is abhorrent that we as Americans in 2020, years after the Emancipation Proclamation, are still exacting judgment on a black man who did not choose this land, but was brought to this land as chattel, as slaves, under the oppressive hand of the slave master, whose sons and daughters now still harbor that stench of hate in their hearts. How? How can we be so indifferent towards one another? How can we believe that we have a right to be judge and jury on the streets of our city and not be held accountable? Many of us are turning a blind eye, and we are deciding that as long as this does not affect my family, my children, my nephews, my nieces, I'm not going to say anything. We are operating under a fear of being attacked, the fear of retribution. But I want to say to you today that whether or not you speak up or you are silent, that fear still exists. I have black sons that I am afraid to allow to leave the house now and to go out and drive in the streets of our city to do what every boy should be able to do, and that is to be a boy, to be a son. Some man who has decided to place a badge on his chest will decide whether or not my son's life is worth keeping. To me, that is unacceptable. And for a white police officer to become a vigilante, for a white police officer to decide in his own mind that today is the day that he can be the judge on the streets of our city, and that he will not be held accountable because the police union is going to fight for him, and they're going to fight that for him not to go to jail. They're going to fight for him to keep his pension, and the people that he hates and the people that he has come against are suffering because of his crash and cruel decisions, I'm appalled. There comes a time where the police unions of our nation must be men and women and stand for justice. But of course, now the question is, in America, what really does justice look like? Dr. King asked for justice. And he asked that it might roll down from the mountains. He asked that justice might go throughout this land to every man, to every person, that all of us would be treated equally under the law. But now I have questions as to what really does justice look like. Is justice the system casting judgment on itself? Can these police officers truly be held accountable by the same system that has sent them out into the streets of our cities with this harbored hatred in their hearts to deal with our people? Can it now bring them in and cause the laws to work in the favor of the people? What does justice look like? Does justice look like judges who are seated on the bench, who are more concerned with being reelected than they are in executing justice correctly, than they are in following the laws? It appears that the laws are followed to a T when it comes to the offenses of those of us who walk the streets with no badges. But when it comes to those who have the badges going against the own laws, the very laws that they are supposed to stand for, justice does not look very good. Those are the times where we have found in America that justice is certainly not blind. Judges who sit in their courtrooms with no heart for the people. They make decisions based on their re-elections, based on who supports them, based on what lawyers give them the most money during the time of their election campaigns, or elections and campaigns. What does justice really look like? Can the family of George Floyd receive justice? Can the family of a Trayvon Martin receive justice? Can the family of a Alton Sterling receive justice? Can the family of Sandra Bland receive justice? These police officers are being given a slap on the wrist. And they're being given the benefit of the doubt, which is something that the persons they are killing have never been given. In a moment, swift judgment is executed. No thought of human life, but they are given the benefit of the doubt. Jesus talks about this. The only solace and comfort that I have as a black man and as a pastor is that Jesus talks about this. And listen to what he says. He says, whatever you have done to the least of these, you've done it unto me. And I'm so glad that I know the ultimate judgment always comes from God. God will have judgment upon every man who is in a leadership position who decides to use his power against the people. I want you to know the Bible is filled with instances where God has had to deal with unjust civil servants. He has only given us this power to bless the people. God has only entrusted us with power. And listen to what Jesus says about this power that we have. He tells Pilate, you don't have any power except my Father in heaven give you power. All power comes from my Father. I feel sorry for a man, for a woman who has decided that they are empowered by some other source other than God. You have a higher judge to answer to, and you will answer to God. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. My brothers, my sisters in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I beg of you, let's not take vengeance into our own hands. Vengeance belongs to God. He said it in his word. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. The only thing that's going to happen by you and I taking vengeance into our own hands is that the very system that has come against us in times like these, the system that's supposed to be for us and who stands on the side of unjust civil servants like these police officers who should be in jail today, the only thing that's going to happen is that that system is going to then come against you and work in the favor of itself again by imprisoning you, but allowing these men to walk free. Let's not do that to ourselves. Stay free so that we can fight. Not fight physically, but fight spiritually, emotionally. Stay free. There's a fight going on. We have a fight that we need to get bad police officers off the streets of our city. These men and women who are walking around with no care for the public. We have a fight that we need to get bad judges off of the bench. We are in a fight that legislators who do not legislate on behalf of the people need to be voted out of office. We are in a fight that a president who speaks against his own country and people needs to be unseated. We are in a fight. Let's not fight on the streets of our city, but let's fight to place these people where they belong, and that is 1, in jail, 2, out of public service. Many of the people who call themselves public servants are not serving the public at all. And for you not to stand up today, my leaders, my friends, those of you who are mayors and judges and pastors and teachers, those of you who lead in our communities and eat fare sumptuously because of the people, for us to not stand in times like these is unsettling. Let me say this to you. I do not care what George Floyd did. I do not care what the cams on the police officers reveal. If 4 police officers who could not contain one black man, they have no business on the force. They should have already turned in their shields and laid down their weapons. if 4 police officers could not join together and subdue one man within police regulations, these men should not be on the job. If you are afraid of the job you are doing, find another way to make a living. You've got to stand for something, or you'll fall for anything. And if we allow that to become a legal defense or excuse for these men, if we allow the idea that this man was resisting arrest, and you're telling me that one white police officer could subdue him on the ground with his knee in his neck, choking him to death, and 3 of them could stand there and not one time say a word to this officer, that tells me that peer pressure does not die when you grow up. We also have adult peer pressure. It appears to me that these police officers were obviously in some way, shape, or form afraid of the police officer who killed George Floyd. And I'll say it again. What happened the other day in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with George Floyd was nothing short of murder on camera by police. And justice, whatever that is in this world today, should be swiftly handed down. Fannie Lou Hamer said it in those infamous words that will live on in history. We should be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Who is going to stand up for the Ahmad Arbery's of the world? Who is going to stand up for the George Floyds of the world? Who is going to stand up for the next victim of a civil servant? My name is Dilton Sanders Sr., and I'm alive only by the grace of God. There but for the grace of God go I, George Floyd, Ahmad Arbery, are my brothers from another mother.